So I'm going to ask Teen Eagle Vice President Jackson Green to come up. Jackson has researched and prepared for the last couple months a presentation talking about postmodernism and secular humanism. And I think once you get past some of these words that you are like, all these isms, and he starts talking about what this worldview believes in history, philosophy, ethics, you're going to say, man, I know exactly what that is because I've experienced it. All right? You start watching Star Wars and you think, man, this is cosmic humanist. There's the Force and all this stuff going on. But I think you're gonna like it. So please join me in welcoming Jackson.
Hello, everyone. Tonight I'm going to discuss postmodernist and secular humanist views on different topics. And first I'll explain what postmodernism and secular humanism actually are. So, humanism is an outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to human rather than divine or supernatural matters. Secular humanism is humanism with regard in particular to the belief that humanity is capable of morality and self-fulfillment without belief in God. So, it's basically the main atheistic worldview. Postmodernism is a late 20th century movement characterized by broad skepticism, subjectivism, or relativism. So that means there's no truth, or everybody has their own truth, or all cultures have their own truth, etc. Paul Kurtz, the father of secular humanism, said that humanism cannot, in any fair sense of the word, apply to one who still believes in God as the source and creator of the universe. A major part of the secular humanist worldview is the disbelief in all things supernatural. Instead of humans having a sin nature, secular humanists believe that all humans are perfectible and that we should strive to perfect every human. Postmodernists embrace the idea of religious pluralism. Religious pluralism is the belief that one must be tolerant of all religions and all religious beliefs because no one religion can be true. In postmodernism, instead of religious claims being judged based on truth, they're judged based on preference. So either you prefer the idea of Jesus dying on a cross, or you don't. It's not true or false. However, postmodernists are intolerant of certain religions or beliefs if they claim to convey objective truth, because claims of objective truth are intolerant. So they believe that they can be intolerant of intolerance. This means that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are not tolerated under postmodernism because they're labeled intolerant. Secular humanists subscribe to the philosophical view of naturalism, also called materialism. Naturalism is the philosophical belief that reality is composed solely of matter and that all phenomena can be explained in terms of natural causes, for instance, the laws of physics. In other words, secular humanists believe that the only way to gain knowledge is through science. Carl Sagan said that science has itself become a kind of religion. Postmodernists deny that there is any universal or objective truth. Another way of putting this is to say that postmodernists deny all meta-narratives. A meta-narrative is an overarching story that seeks to explain the way that everything is, and another word for that is a worldview. However, the statement that there are no meta-narratives is itself a meta-narrative because it's an overarching statement. This means that postmodernism is essentially an anti-worldview worldview. And one of the main literary methodologies of postmodernists is deconstruction. Deconstruction is reading a text and interpreting the text based only on what it means to you. In other words, your interpretation of the text is actually more important than what it says. An example of deconstruction is the original decision of Roe v. Wade. Instead of interpreting the Constitution as the authors intended, they decided to look at the Constitution as a living document. In other words, they deconstructed it and invented meaning where there was none. Without a belief in the supernatural, secular humanists don't really have a way to determine right or wrong. Instead, they believe in the idea of moral relativism. Moral or ethical relativism is the idea that there are no objective standards of right or wrong. Instead, the same behaviors can be right or wrong for different people at different times. But since there are no standards, secular humanists largely disagree on what exactly is moral. Postmodernists also reject the idea of absolute right and wrong, and instead they believe in the idea of cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is the idea that truth and morals are relative to culture. For instance, the Nazis condoned the murder of Jews, so it was moral to murder Jews in the Nazi culture, according to postmodernists. Each culture believes that their own moral view is correct, even though they can't prove it, under the postmodernist worldview. Secular humanists generally believe in the theory of evolution. However, there is more than one theory of evolution, because none of them can fully explain the evidence. Darwinism is the name for the original theory of evolution proposed by Charles Darwin. In this theory, random variations can cause a species to have a higher likelihood of passing off its traits to the next generation, and this process is called natural selection. However, in the 1930s, evolutionary scientists combined Darwin's theory of evolution with the recently discovered science of genetics to create neo-Darwinism. In this theory, species take thousands or millions of years to slowly transform into other species. However, as more fossils were discovered, scientists realized that the fossil record doesn't support Darwinian theories because no or very few transition fossils have been found. Scientists then came up with the theory of punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium is the idea that instead of species slowly transitioning into other species, the species will stay at equilibrium with its environment for a while and won't change very much, and then suddenly, over the span of a few thousand years, will quickly transition to another species. But of course, for species to be able to evolve into other species, there must be an original species that everything came from. Secular humanists believe that the first species just happened to appear from chemicals mixing in a swamp billions of years ago. And Darwin didn't even believe that life just happened. And he said probably all the organic beings have descended from some one primordial form into which life was first breathed. Postmodernists generally believe in one of the theories of evolution, but they're quite cautious about it because they're overarching theories. And postmodernists believe that there is no truth, which includes knowledge gained from science, so postmodernists aren't overly concerned with biology. Most secular humanists deny the existence of an absolute moral code or natural law, in other words. And this means that all law stems from the government, and law has no connection to morality. This idea is called legal positivism or positive law. Legal positivism can be extremely dangerous because the government has an infinite potential to abuse its power, because all law comes from the government. There's no outside standard. Western law, especially American law, is rooted in the idea that there are knowable objective truths, which stems from the Christian perspective our founding fathers had. However, postmodernists believe that knowable objective truths do not exist, so they instead insist that Western law reflects white male bias. Postmodernists seek to eliminate the West's Judeo-Christian heritage and replace it with subjective morality, and they prioritize storytelling over logic. Secular humanists believe in democracy, but it's not democracy really as we know it. Secular humanists believe in the idea of liberalism, which is the idea of a secular government with lots of power. They even go as far to say as that there should be a secular world government instead of many local and national governments. In the postmodern worldview, there is no ultimate right or wrong way to approach politics. However, since most of the early postmodern thinkers emerged from the Marxist tradition, postmodernists generally lean toward the left. Postmodernists embrace identity politics and social justice. In other words, they believe that any perceived oppressed or marginalized groups, such as black people, women, or homosexuals, should be given an advantage in society. One example of this is affirmative action for college admissions. Since postmodernists don't believe in right or wrong theories, they simply opt for strategic theories to further the causes of social justice. Most secular humanists believe in wealth distribution, in other words, socialism. Socialism only works under the view that humans are perfectible, which is the whole idea of secular humanism. However, some secular humanists opt for capitalism because of socialism's many failures, which have caused great harm to millions. They recognize that. Most postmodernists believe in socialism also. They believe in socialism because socialism equitably redistributes wealth to minorities, which ties back to identity politics. Secular humanists view history through the lens of unguided evolution and human intelligence. This view of history is called historical evolution. Secular humanists believe that humans are inherently good and that they have free will, but they're driven to do bad things sometimes by the environment around them. However, instead of believing that humans shape history in and of themselves, secular humanists believe that human ideologies shape history. For instance, they believe that Christianity shaped history in the past, but that the Christian ideology is now outdated and can't address modern problems. Secular humanists believe that humans have slowly been moving toward perfection over the course of history and that they one day will reach it. Postmodernists disagree on how to look at history. Many postmodernists don't believe that history has any ultimate purpose at all. And the belief that there is no ultimate purpose is called nihilism. However, some less radical postmodernists believe in the idea of historicism. Historicism is the view that past beliefs, morals, and truths can only be understood in relation to the cultural and historical periods they arose in. For instance, a postmodernist would argue that we can't truly understand the Holocaust because we're not a Jew or a Nazi from the 1940s. Other postmodernists subscribe to the idea of revisionist history, which is rewriting history to empower oppressed social groups, back to social justice and identity politics again. They use history instead of a fact, they use it as a tool to further their beliefs. And some postmodernists don't believe in history at all. They instead believe that since there are no true historical facts, there's really no way to understand what happened in the past. So they don't even concern themselves with history. As you can see, secular humanism and postmodernism have quite extreme views on some of these issues. And when the idea of objective truth, and especially objective right and wrong, is disregarded, it can be extremely dangerous. So we must educate ourselves on these issues so that we can make wise decisions with how we use our time, money, and votes. Anybody have any questions? Thank you.